A few days later, the FIA took away Uge Dave's super license.
They can do that? So the governing body of the sport can be like, hey, your driver's this bad, get rid of him. That's nutty. What is going on, guys? It is JJ here, back with a new video, and this is one that I feel like you guys are going to enjoy, I'm going to enjoy. It's going to be a blast because we've taken a look at some of the best of F1. We've taken a brief look at Alonso and Vettel and Senna, which we need to do probably more in-depth videos on those. We've taken a look at Kimi Räikkönen. That also needs to be a bit more in-depth. Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen. But it is time for me to learn where I would be if I were to just be plopped into F1 today, and that is with the worst drivers in F1 history. It's time. It is time. We need to take a look at drivers that were like so bad that people will always remember them for being that bad. You know, like people have those, like it's like who were like some people like in world football that were like that. Whatever dude like found his way into Southampton. I don't know how, like by faking being George Weah's cousin. That dude. Marcus Alonso when he's alone in a back four. That dude. People that are just terrible at the sport and you don't understand how they got their job. That's essentially what we're going for here. And this is going to be a good one for F1 because I feel like I would like to know who I would compare with in terms of drivers. So let me know you guys' thoughts on this down in the comments below. Let me know your favorite of the worst drivers. And we'll probably take individual looks at all of these guys because I have no clue who they are and I would like to learn. But yeah, let's get into the video. As always, guys, you can find the original video down in the description below.
7 F1 drivers that were so bad they'll never be forgotten. Every driver who races in F1 will hope to have success, or at least make a mark on the sport in some way. Unfortunately, some drivers end up being memorable for all the wrong reasons. Fans these days love to hate on the likes of Lance Stroll or Pastor Maldonado for being bad, but compared to some of the drivers in this list, Stroll might as well be Ayrton Senna. These 7 drivers were not only bad, but they had moments that genuinely made you wonder whether it was possible to do a worse job. Uge Dave. At 31, Uge was quite old for a debutant.
Really?
He joined the new Super Aguri team for 2006, but he had a decent racing background. Runner-up in the Japanese F3 and the highly competitive Formula Nippon Championship, a race winner in Super GT and French F3, and with a 5th place finish at the Macau GP, Uge obviously had plenty of talent.
So, actually, this is a good question for me. Does F1, like I know F1 is like the global sport, it's where like they race, etc., but despite there being like lower levels, like the, was it FE, like the energy efficient ones, and F2, are there like country by country, like F1 like systems, kind of like farm systems? Because I thought you guys said that the teams themselves already had like lower level teams. So like Red Bull will have a lower team and Mercedes will have a lower team. But are there like country by country teams? Or like leagues or F1 divisions like they just said? I would like to actually know that. That's a genuine question because I don't know. So I don't know if the way that he just made that sound, that sounds realistic. It's like the Champions League and then the individual leagues.
None of this seemed to come with him to Formula 1. At the season opener in Bahrain, Uge looked like he was struggling to even keep the car on the track.
Really?
At one point, he corrected a slide so violently that his hand slipped off the steering wheel. He was almost 3 seconds slower than his teammate Takuma Sato in qualifying and 7 seconds off Michael Schumacher's pace. Amazingly, he made it 33 laps into the race before his engine failed, which maybe was a blessing in disguise. Malaysia was a slight improvement, just 1.7 seconds behind Sato in qualifying, as he again retired with mechanical issues, but he seemed to take a step backwards in Australia. He spun a number of times in practice and became something of an obstacle to other drivers in qualifying, where he was almost 4 seconds slower than Sato. If the 107% rule was around in 2006, he'd have failed to qualify twice. He finally managed to finish a race, however, 13th and last, 3 laps down and a lap behind his teammate. His days were numbered, and the next race at Imola was the last of those numbers. After qualifying 1.6 seconds behind Sato, on the first lap of the race he ploughed into the side of the Midland of Christian Albers, flipping him into the gravel in a spectacular incident. Under the advice of the FIA, Super Aguri dropped Uge, and a few days later, the FIA took away Uge's super license.
They can do that? So the governing body of the sport can be like, hey, your driver's this bad, get rid of him. That's nutty.
Effectively banning him from Formula 1. Harsh,
That's nutty.
Taki Inoue. By results alone, Taki Inoue was poor. The qualifying gaps to his teammates were regularly measured in seconds rather than tenths. He only finished 5 of his 18 races, with retirements being a solid mix of spins and mechanical issues. But it's not the lack of speed that makes Inoue's career so legendarily awful. It was the unusual and common. During practice at Monaco, Inoue went off at Mirabeau, stalled the car and had to watch from the sidelines. After the session, he jumped back in and got a tow back to the pits. As this was happening, French rally legend Jean Rannyotti was outspanking one of the course cars around the circuit. As he came through the swimming pool, he spotted Inoue being towed back to the paddock, but it was too late, and Rannyotti slammed into the back of the footwork. Inoue turned the wheel to avoid hitting the truck that was pulling him, causing the rope to effectively flip him upside down. Although Inoue had the presence of mind to keep wearing his helmet, his seatbelts weren't done up. Incredibly, he was okay, a fact he said he realised when his balls moved after the crash. If balls don't move, then there's a problem with brain damage, I think. Amazingly, that wouldn't be his last incident with a course vehicle. After breaking down from 18th place early in the Hungarian GP, Inoue's footwork started to smoke. In an attempt to help out, he grabbed a fire extinguisher from the side of the track, but as he ran back across the grass to his car, he was mown down by a course vehicle that had just arrived on the scene. After rolling across the bonnet, Inoue hopped a couple of times before collapsing on the floor. Apart from a slightly sore leg, he was fine, making the whole thing one of the most comical bloopers in F1 history. To be fair to Inoue, his driving was beginning to improve slightly as the season progressed, but a planned drive with Minardi in 1996 fell through when a sponsor pulled out. He's since embraced his status as a terrible driver, freely admitting that he wasn't good enough for F1 and joking about the unusual incidents that made his career.
So he's a cool guy. He's a cool guy.
What
That's
is Delatraz doing? A classic line of Murray Walker commentary from the Nürburgring in 1995 that summed up the Swiss driver's brief F1 career.
Oh goodness.
Delatraz drove 3 races in F1, the 1994 Australian GP for Larousse, and the Portuguese and European GPs in 1995 for Pacific, and by all accounts were rather terrible. In qualifying for Australia, he was 3.2 seconds slower than his teammates and was a staggering 10 laps down when his gearbox gave out after 56 laps.
Dude, okay, I understand 3.2 seconds is not. I don't think that's a lot, but obviously in F1, like the margins are probably insanely different. So let me know if that's like a ton of distance that like it should have been made up essentially.
Delatraz had another chance, but if anything, he was even worse. He was 12 seconds off of the pole time in Portugal and over 5 seconds slower than the next fastest driver. In the race, he was several seconds slower than anyone else, lapped after just 7 laps, and retired after 14 laps with cramp. Yes, you heard that right, cramp. His final outing at the Nürburgring was barely any better. Once again, he was seconds off the pace, and the moment when he weaved across the circuit for no reason prompted Murray to wonder what he was up to. Delatraz at least finished this race, albeit in 15th, and last, 7 laps down. And that was it for Delatraz's F1 career. A failed sponsor payment saw him replaced for the rest of the year, while his lack of pace prompted F1 to introduce the 107% qualifying rule. Although his time in F1 was laughable, Delatraz went on to be much more successful in sports cars, twice winning his class at Le Mans.
So he actually is a good driver, but just not in F1.
Uncommon occurrence, and usually only happens because a car has breached technical regulations. Not this time, however. Pease entered his home race 3 times in the late 1960s without success. The last of those occasions in 1969 ended with one of the most unusual and embarrassing disqualifications in F1 history. He was too slow. At the time of the disqualification, Pease had only completed 22 laps of the Canadian Grand Prix, less than half the amount of leader Jackie Stewart. It'd also been something of an obstruction on the track, pushing other cars off the circuit and getting in the way of the lead.
Really?
After almost wiping Stewart out of the lead, Ken Tyrrell went to the stewards and demanded Pease be black flagged. The protest worked, and the 48-year-old Canadian became the only person in F1 to be disqualified from a race for driving too slowly. Ricardo Rosset.
That would be me. Honestly, that would be me. I would be the dickhead that's cutting people off at every opportunity. And then, essentially, he was stabilizing. He was stabilizing the field. If you're too far ahead, you gotta get cut off. That's what he was doing. If you play racing games, you know that there's always a stabilizer.
Year in Formula 3000, a forerunner of today's Formula 2, earning him an F1 drive with footwork the following year. Looking at Rosset's efforts in 1998, however, you can see why he's made this list. He failed to qualify for 5 races, while teammate Tora Tagagi was more than capable of mixing it with the Minardis, Prosts, Arrows and Stewarts. When he did qualify, he was a lot less incident prone than he had been in 1996, with one notable exception. Anyone remember the colossal 14-car collision at a wet Spa? Well, it should have only really been a 13-car pile-up, but Rosset, a good few seconds after the bulk of the action had already happened, ploughed into the carnage at full speed.
Holy
He was that driver. That somehow wasn't the worst moment either. That would be Monaco. In attempting to qualify, which he obviously failed to do, he had an off at Mirabeau. He got going from that, only to have a spin in the second part of the swimming pool. Somehow he not only didn't hit anything, but had kept the engine running, and attempted to do a spin turn to get back pointing the right way. He messed that up too, and ended up stranded on the curb on the inside of the corner at a marshal's post. Embarrassing. Even his own team were fed up.
Oh my God.
After the incident, his mechanics reportedly rearranged the letters of the name on his scooter so that it spelt the word tosser. It must have been an incredibly tough season for Rosset.
Hey, that's my type of people. That's my type of people right there. Hey, you just gotta put people in their place
Struggling
sometimes.
enough with your own
You gotta put people in their
performance
place
is bad enough,
sometimes.
but having a team that clearly didn't want him can't have made it an easy environment to be in.
I mean, yeah, that's
David
fair.
Walker.
You feel bad, but at the
The
same time,
first
you
job
don't.
any F1 driver has is to beat their teammates. David Walker perhaps knows that better than most, but he was Emerson Fittipaldi's teammate in 1972 when Emo became F1's youngest world champion. Walker, he didn't even score a single point, a unique achievement for a full-time teammate of a world champion. In his 10 races that season, Walker qualified 20th or lower 5 times and had a best grid slot of 12th. Fittipaldi had taken 3 poles and never been lower on the grid than 9th. Things were barely any better in the races either, with a best finish of 9th.
So you want to be better
in
than
Spain.
your teammate, but
Already
there's
ended up finishing laps
gigantic
behind
gap.
his teammate. Of course, it wasn't all as straightforward as Walker simply being bad. Lotus boss Colin Chapman was notorious for putting his focus on a single driver to the detriment of the others, and Walker was no different. It was a vicious cycle. The worse Walker performed, the less attention was placed on him, which made him do worse, and so on. Claudio
Wow,
Lanza.
that kind of
There are a
sucks.
ton of
That was
drivers from the
depressing.
late
That was a
1980s
depressing
and
addition.
early 1990s who have strings of failures to qualify for races on the record.
So who was
Many
the
of them
worst
also
one
had
here?
experience with the dreaded pre-qualifying. Back then, F1 had so many different teams and drivers that it wouldn't be possible for them all to be accommodated for an entire race weekend. So any new teams or teams that had performed poorly previously had to run the gauntlet of pre-qualifying. Held on the Friday morning before the main practice sessions, the 4 fastest cars would be allowed to take part in the main qualifying session, while everyone else's weekend would be over before it even started. Claudio Lanza's entire F1 career consisted of only pre-qualifying sessions.
Oh wow, he was that slow.
hopelessly slow at all 14 events. He was always faster than the drivers from the Life team, but that car was so bad that it would have struggled to compete in F3000, let alone F1. If you ignore Life and occasionally the similarly terrible Subaru-powered Coloni, Lanza was always the slowest driver in pre-qualifying by a significant margin. His average deficit to teammate Roberto Moreno was 5.7 seconds.
Oh, that is a lot.
Yeah, you heard me right.
That is a lot.
The team collapsed with 2 races left to run in the season, taking Lanza's career, if you can call it that, with it. Lanza holds the unenviable record of the most race entries without ever managing to start one. Have we missed out any drivers that you would put in this list?
I feel bad for some of these people. I really do feel bad for some. Like you are on the cusp, essentially. Like, and they are working hard and hard and hard, and they just never get there. Like, some of them know they're bad, some of them don't, and they keep trying. Some of them go to other places and succeed. But damn, that sucks. But okay, let me know your guys' favorite. Let me know your favorite of the worst F1 drivers in history. I appreciate you guys so much. Let me know your thoughts on that, and as well, what other drivers you guys want to see, whether it's the best, whether it's the worst, whether it's like a cult classic. I want to know them. So let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and peace.